Welcome. I'm Joanna Mupenduki. I'm the Deputy Director of Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, and we have Beth Reingold here with us. Thank you for coming, Beth. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I'm Beth Reingold. I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Baltimore Chamber, and I'm very honored to be your MC this evening. And if I may, I'm going to tell people a little bit about you, Joanna. And then you're going to tell a little bit about, or a lot about, what MCVRC does, so everyone here with us today knows. I first got to know MCVRC when they joined our Chamber of Commerce, and the work that they do is just really incredible. And Joanna leads this wonderful charge. She is the Deputy Executive Director of MCVRC, and she brings a wealth of legal experience to the role, a summa cum laude graduate of Hillsdale College and cum laude graduate of Ave Maria School of Law. She has served as a prosecutor and attorney in multiple states, including Maryland, DC, and Virginia. She originally joined MCVRC as a staff attorney and returned in 2023 to help lead the organization. She lives in Southern Maryland with her family and enjoys hiking, traveling, and hunting for shark teeth along the shore. So thank you, Joanna.
Thank you. It's good to be here. That's mostly my son's favorite activities, which have to be my own now. So.
Of course.
So it's really great to be here and to be a part of Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. I think you never really realize how important an organization like Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center is until you become a victim of crime and you realize how important it is to have someone stand up for you in court and say, no, it's not okay to have someone else treat you that way, and to have that voice and that explanation of what's going on, and to have someone explaining the whole process and being there throughout the whole process, because it's not something that's quickly done. It's a whole journey. And so I've learned that throughout my life, and I think many other people have. And we have a lot of great employees at our organization, and so I'm very proud to be a part of Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center started 43 years ago now, back in 1982, when Stephanie Roper was a college student, and she was murdered when she experienced car trouble and was kidnapped by the men who had said they were going to give her a ride home and did not give her a ride home. And sadly, they kidnapped her, raped her, murdered her, and then mutilated her body. She was missing for days. Her parents could not find her. And then after that horrible process, after she was found, her parents were not allowed to be part of the process. They were not informed of court dates. They were not told of what was going on in the case. And then they were not even allowed to be in the courtroom during the trial and to learn what was going on. So as a result of that, they said they don't want this to happen to anybody else. And so they said, we're going to do something about this. So they started to become involved first in changing the laws in the state of Maryland. And the first thing they did was get some changes. They said, not only do victims have the right to have a victim impact statement, but the court does not get to decide if they get to present that victim impact statement. If the victim wants to present it, the court has to listen to it. And they made some other significant changes. So because of Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, there have been over 100 laws passed in the state of Maryland on behalf of victims. There has also been, many of those laws have been enshrined in a constitutional amendment that was passed in 1994. And so after a lot of those legislative changes, the Ropers decided, no, at this point, we now want to make sure that these rights are actually given to victims, and they kind of we like to say, professionalized the organization and hired more attorneys. And so now attorneys can actually enter their appearances on behalf of victims. We have attorneys who cover all of the counties in the state of Maryland. And we have victim advocates as well. So those are the people who answer the phone, they talk to victims, they kind of can help walk you through the steps of what's happening, determine if you need just resources, if this is a legal question, you need to talk to an attorney, then we get that attorney assigned, that type of thing, make sure you're talking to the right person in the right county, that type of thing, and go from there. So we have a lot of people. We are very busy traveling all around the state. And so that's a little bit about what Maryland Crime Victims does. We also have a new program that just started a little over a year ago, where we are working with a contractor to provide mental health services for victims throughout the state. It's with Safe Harbor Behavioral Health Programs. And so they have physical offices as far north as Frederick, Maryland, as far south as Waldorf, Maryland, and then, east and west between Baltimore and DC. And then for all the other locations, telehealth appointments are available as well throughout the state of Maryland.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Joanna. Before we jump in, I just want to remind everybody that while this conversation is designed as a casual town hall, the topics are somewhat intense, but we want everybody to feel comfortable and safe. Everybody in this room is an ally and an advocate. We have some great groups here, and I just want to give a shout out to Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office, the Family Crisis Center of Baltimore County, so right over here on this side, and also Women's Law Center of Maryland. Thank you for being here. And then on this side, we have Turnaround, we have House of Ruth, and what am I missing? Oh, the Baltimore Public Library, who has generously hosted us here today. So thank you so much. And our sponsors for today are the Maryland State Bar, Lang Bean, and Hamad Mateen. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, that's
okay.
right.
All right. Whew. Okay. So remember that, again, this is designed to be a town hall and casual, and we have some facilitators to help with questions, and we also have an audience on social media as well.
That's correct. So we are not showing the audience on social media. It's just showing us up here. But we will try to repeat questions so that it is heard. So the question is heard online when we answer it, so that they know what we're talking about. But I do just want to give a quick shout out to the staff of Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center that is here. We have Jennifer Abel, who's our Director of Finance and Operations. We have a couple of attorneys, James Thomas, who does cover Baltimore County. And we also have Alberto Halperin, who also covers the whole state of Maryland, but he's one of our Spanish-speaking attorneys. He also speaks Italian for any of our Italian-speaking people in the state of Maryland. Have we had an Italian-speaking client? Not yet? Not yet? Okay, we're waiting. Okay, we're hopeful we will have one soon. We also have Casey Roselle, who is our communications and media specialist. We have Rochelle Brown in the back there. And what's your official title, Rochelle? Yes, administration assistant and referral specialist. We have Barbara Darley up here, who is our victim services specialist. We have Sandra Sana Buckles, who's our development officer. And let's see, did I leave anybody out? I think I got everyone who's here. So thank you all for being here.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to jump in. And Joanna did explain briefly what MCVRC does in terms of its history, but do you want to touch on anything else and sort of explain maybe the process, getting involved, homicide, just jump in, whatever feels right to start off explaining.
briefly explain kind of how you can get in touch with us and kind of how a case starts. There's kind of two main ways to get in touch with us is to either one call. So we have an 800 number, and the easiest way to say it is 877 victim 1. So you have to look at the touchpad and see what those numbers are to match up with victim 1. And the second way is to go to our website, which is MD Crime Victims. So there's an S at the end of victims.org. And then we have an intake form on the front page. And so you can fill out that intake form. And so whether you call or you do the intake form, if you call, we're going to first try to figure out where the crime occurred, because where the crime occurred is going to dictate what county the court case happens in. And so then we're going to get you to the right advocate to talk to, because we divide up our work assignments based on the county. So we don't want you to have to tell your story to 20 different people to get you to the right person. And so we're going to figure out what county that is. So we get you to the right advocate to talk to and tell the story to that person so that they can kind of be like, okay, these are the things we have that can help you. And so whether it's the resources for that county, looking at criminal injuries compensation board, doing that process, if it's you already have a criminal case that has court dates coming up, you already have a case going and there's already a legal question, and it's going to need an attorney to look into it, all that type of stuff. So figuring out kind of where the case is. And then even if there's not a criminal case yet that has been filed, to figure out where the crime has happened is still important, so that help can be given to you regardless. Based on that county is important. So that's going to be the first thing. And even if you do an online intake form, that's going to go into our system. We're going to still figure that out and have the right advocate call you back. So that's kind of our most basic way to get a hold of us. So no matter what that crime is. And we do cover all crimes, whether it's a homicide, assault, it can be a domestic violence assault, it can be theft, in anything, we're there and we can help.
You answered the question I was going to ask you. What is the range of crimes? So thank you for anticipating that question. Are the intake specialists, there must be training for them, right? Because when people call, they're upset, it's intense, they're likely, I'm guessing, very, very overwhelmed. So, talk me through that so that people know, again, that it's a safe process, and that if they're talking to somebody, not doing the online form, that they're going to be talking to people who are experienced and who know how to direct them. Like you said, they don't have to tell their story 20 times to 20 different people. So how does MCVRC do that with the intake staff?
Yeah, so they're all trained victim advocates. And so that's a process. Whenever we have a victim advocate, they are trained for several weeks, and we do have, they do go through it's a academy at the Roper Academy that they do all end up going through. And so it is a training process, and they spend a lot of time working on it, and they're all very excellent at their jobs. And so they do a really good job listening to a person and really trying to understand, because everybody has a story, right? And so trying to listen to that story, to understand the big picture, and to also understand kind of what's the most immediate concern. And then and sometimes, everybody has their most immediate concerns, but sometimes they can listen to that story and kind of also parse out of there what they know the most important things are as well. Because sometimes you might not realize, hey, actually, you really need to be paying attention, because these court dates are coming up fast, and you do need to be paying attention, because if you don't do this or that by this certain date, you're going to miss some things. So those types of things.
And then does an attorney step in? Because I would imagine that the whole legal process is scary and overwhelming. I mean, I'm a longtime watcher of Law and Order, but that doesn't mean that I understand the legal process. How can MCVRC help people understand what that is when they're already so upset and shaken?
Well, I think the most important thing to realize is it's not quite like Law and Order. It never goes as quickly as it does in that 1 hour episode.
Right.
It seems like usually, they've done the investigation. 30 minutes later, they have the DNA results, and then they're in court the next day. So alas, the worst part about the criminal justice system is the slowness of it.
Right.
And how many times you're going to go there and get a continuance instead of actually go to trial. So often that's the frustration of the criminal justice process. So that's a big part of it. But our attorneys are excellent at that, explaining that process and when things are going to be happening and when, hey, you're likely to get a continuance and why that's going to happen. And it's for a variety of reasons.
And probably explaining what a continuance is too.
Correct.
I mean, really, down to bare bones, super basics here.
Yes. And so when we say continuance, it's many reasons why that court date, because you're going to get a continuance before you even get to a trial. It's going to be why that court date is going to be continued, which means going to another day. So you're going to have a pretrial hearing that's not even going to happen because they're going to continue it to, 3 weeks out because somebody wasn't ready or someone didn't get a chance to get the discovery they wanted or the attorney was sick or they just, the judge had a bad day or there's going to be a variety of reasons for that.
Yeah, that seems like it's really helpful for anyone who calls. So great.
Yeah, so I think you also had asked, when is an attorney going to get involved?
Right.
So it is based case by case,
right.
Dependent on the needs of the case, where they are, what the questions are, and what the client's needs are in the case as well.
All right,
so.
That's really helpful to know. Do you want to talk any more about the legal process? Anything you'd like to add?
I think we can talk a little bit about the victim impact statements. We are involved in that. We do help with those, kind of telling you, what kinds of things you should include in a victim impact statement. Obviously, we can't write a victim impact statement for you. We weren't there. We aren't personally the people impacted by the crime, but we can tell you what types of things you should include in that victim impact statement. What are the rules? What is the judge looking for? That type of thing. And so, kind of the things you need to include and the things you should not include.
And that typically that comes before sentencing?
Well, it comes at sentencing.
At sentencing.
Yeah. So after a person has been convicted.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're doing a sentencing is the opportunity for a victim to give the impact victim impacts statement so that the judge can consider it when they give a sentence.
Great. That's very helpful to know too. And then MCVRC is with the client through the whole process to the very end, right? And then sort of after the end, that might be parole, that might be probation, or that might be resentencing. So
that's correct.
Do I understand that? Okay.
Yeah. So especially in homicide cases and very lengthy sentence, any kind of sentence that's going to be a very lengthy sentence. So especially in homicide cases, we are there for decades afterward.
Wow.
So even in the cases of the two men who killed Stephanie Roper, one of them died in prison, but the other defendant, he is still in prison. And he just had a resentencing hearing last December where we represented Roberta Roper in that case. And she was finally 42 years later able to give a victim impact statement because she was actually not allowed to give a victim impact statement the first time around.
And I've had the great honor of meeting Roberta Roper when you all had your ribbon cutting for your location. And she's a small little lady not very tall, but my goodness, has she made an incredible impact for victims and advocating for victims. She has just moved mountains, and to stand in the same space with her is really something else. So she is just tremendous. And did you say 42 years in the making?
It's
for her
43
statement?
now.
43
Yeah.
years. And when I was at the resource center, I think I have this right, that some of the officers who worked on that case were there with her and with the staff, and they're in it for the long haul too. So it's pretty incredible to see that partnership. And I don't know that it always happens
they're all
that way.
retired now,
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
So yes,
But it's great to see that there's a team behind you, and I would imagine that's a pretty important message to send to victims, that this is your team, and MCVRC is here and well, for the long haul, but with all kinds of resources. So would you talk a little bit about domestic violence? And I know we also we have Turnaround here and some other resource centers that probably can address questions, answer questions too.
yes, no, there's a lot of great local resources here. So I'll turn to them after I kind of talk about what Maryland Crime Victims Resources does with domestic violence. But I think domestic violence is important to talk about because so many people are impacted by it. It's kind of one of those situations that a lot of people don't expect to find themselves in, where it's a cycle of violence that happens when a partner and it's called domestic violence because usually it's something that happens within the household. It is traditionally defined as like a romantic partner, but it can be, a parent or an adult child, that type of thing. So it can be any member of the household, hence the name domestic violence. But usually when we talk about it, it's a romantic partner. And so it's not a situation where that person is always violent and always a problem. It's usually someone who is controlling, who becomes more violent, who then is very apologetic afterward, begging for forgiveness, and promises to do better, but then goes back to their old ways, becomes more controlling again, and it continues on, and each time becomes worse and worse. And so that is in reference to this cycle of violence. And so it's a very difficult thing. And so it's a situation where we really rely on these other partners that we have, and they exist across the state. So just because you're not in Baltimore County or somewhere that is serviced by the organizations that are here tonight, there are other organizations in every county in Maryland. And so it is important when you do find yourself in a domestic violence relationship to look at first safety planning, because the most dangerous time in a domestic violence relationship is when you're trying to get out of it. And so creating a safety plan of what you're going to do to get out of it when it becomes dangerous. So where are you going to go? How are you going to have the money to protect yourself? How are you going to have the documentation that you need? All of those types of things are things that you need to do and prepare for. And so that's part of safety planning.
Can I interrupt you for just a
Yes.
moment, Joanna? Let's say a victim of domestic violence calls or does the online intake with MCVRC. Does MCVRC have resources to assist specifically with domestic violence? Do you refer that person, once they've reported the crime, do they refer that person to perhaps Turnaround, to Family Crisis Center? How does that work specifically for domestic violence?
Yeah, usually we're going to refer them to one of our partners.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to figure out like where they live, what exactly they need,
Right.
and then we're going to refer them.
Because it's it's a different kind of crime. You just talked about that cycle of behavior and the apologies and the makeup period, and then it just repeats itself, right? So as opposed to a carjacking or something that's just kind of it seems diminishing to say a one-time crime, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like domestic violence keeps happening.
Right. And especially when they're not necessarily in a safe place yet. Right.
Yeah, so it's different. So that's also really good to know that you have a referral system set up to help. And it's mostly women, not always,
No,
but,
not always.
but mostly women, obviously, who are the victims of domestic violence.
And maybe now would be a good time to go to our partners and just briefly have them touch on what they do to help victims of domestic violence. Maybe we can start with House of Ruth, or whoever wants to go first.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh, is that on?
My name is Nora Weems. I'm the Associate Director.
Okay, there, that's working.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nora Weems. I'm the Associate Director of the Legal Clinic at the House of Ruth. And so we have offices in the courthouses throughout Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Prince George's County, as well as Montgomery County. And so our attorneys, we provide free representation in protective order proceedings, as well as divorce and custody cases. If the parties are intimate partners, we also help people fill out petitions for protective orders, modifications. We also give out advice. Outside of our legal clinic, we also have a shelter, we have counseling, we have a training institute. I do have with me one of our legal advocates. We do have legal advocates, and they do accompany people to court as well as criminal court. And so that's what we do in our legal department.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten Salader. I am with the Community Engagement and Training team at Turnaround. So we are focused on being out in the community because our resources are only as good as people know about them. We like to be out there in schools, in churches, wherever will have us. There are people that need our help or people that may know someone that needs our help. So some of our services, we provide counseling, we provide legal advocacy as well. We have people that can accompany survivors to court and make that very stressful time a little less stressful. We do free education prevention. So we talked a lot, you talked a lot, Jenna, about just like the cycle of violence and how that starts and how it's perpetuated. And a lot of times with victims that live in a household that may be tumultuous, children may be impacted, and that's where education is really important, just to start young, try to teach kids, even if maybe this is what you're seeing or this is what you've seen, this is not how it has to be. We have prevention education, and we do a lot of resource planning, access to housing resources, job resources, etc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joan. I'm one of the librarians here at the Owens Mills branch of the Baltimore County Public Library. While we at the library, we can't give legal advice because we are public librarians and not law librarians. We can connect patrons to different resources, and whether dealing with domestic violence or any other law advice that they need, we can connect to those resources. However, we do also have social workers at our library, specifically at our Woodlawn and Randallstown branches in the Baltimore County area, which also deal with domestic violence, as well as grief, public assistance, and lots of mental health and other resources that are available. There might be other questions that they can answer, and you can either do drop-ins at those branches, make an appointment, or if you can't get to those locations, there are also virtual appointments that are available, and you can always either call or email.
Thank you.
While I move to the other side of the room and get to our other resources, we had a question come in.
Okay.
How can someone prove domestic abuse when it's not physical?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a lot of different ways to prove that. So, I mean, if it's a if they're writing things, if it's something that they're saying. So written, obviously, that's easy. If they write it and you can print it, they're typing it. Now, of course, threats in Maryland have to be imminent, which means something that is happening right now, a threat, like, so they can't say, in 10 years, next year, I'm going to beat you, that type of thing. It has to be a very, like, it's going to happen right now kind of threat. And so that's something. So if it's written, it's much easier to prove. If it's something multiple people hear, then you can have multiple witnesses that have heard it, that type of thing.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Powell. I'm the Family Law Director at the Women's Law Center. We provide free legal representation to survivors of domestic violence in protective orders, divorce and custody cases, and we also assist with immigration, so VAWA petitions, U visas, petitions related to domestic violence. We also have a family law hotline, which does not require anybody to be a survivor of domestic violence. We also have an employment law hotline. We have legal advocates that sit in the Baltimore County Circuit Courthouse and the Carroll County Circuit Courthouse. They help with the protective orders. We also have a legal advocate dedicated solely to divorce and custody cases. And so we are representing people, full representation from the start of the case all the way to the end, primarily in Baltimore and Carroll counties for protective orders. Our divorce and custody attorneys, in theory, can go anywhere in the state, but realistically stay in the Baltimore, Carroll County, Baltimore City, sometimes Anne Arundel County, sometimes Howard County, sometimes Harford County, but we're in this sort of general central Maryland. There is such a place.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephanie. I represent the Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office.
Can you hold a little closer?
We,
Oh, that's
as
better.
the prosecutor for the state of Maryland, we, with me today is some other victim advocates from our office. So we are supporting victims who have active criminal cases in Baltimore County. So we refer out to many of these organizations. We do provide, through grant funding, counseling services to our to victims of homicide, sex offense, domestic violence, and many other services, transportation help, getting them to and from court. We sit in court with our victims and support them through the process. Much of what you can do, we do within our office.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Shalana Ramirez. I'm from the Family Crisis Center in Baltimore County. So like our other programs, we also are advocates. We sit in the courtroom with our clients. We also provide free counseling, relocation assistance for victims who are fleeing intimate partner violence. We do have a shelter also for families who are fleeing from intimate partner violence. And I do want to give a big shout out to the Women's Law Center. They do a great job representing our clients on the protective order cases. We do have advocates who are at district court on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in Towson and Essex, just to be there to listen to the docket, to address any concerns that any victims may have, provide resources, education, safety planning. And so all of our partnering programs, we kind of collaborate together to make sure every victim gets served.
That's great. Wow. See, we learn something every time. So it's really great to hear everything that's going on. And I think even with all of these services, there's always more people that we can help and cover. So even with all of this great help, there's more people out there who need us. So that's great.
Yeah, and I just feel like I'm in very good hands in Baltimore County and in the state of Maryland with all of these organizations and MCVRC. One word that I heard a lot was protective order. And I wonder, Joanna, if you could talk about the protective order, because there are other kinds of orders too. There's not just the protective order. So could you kind of, explain those different orders and what they mean?
Yes, so the biggest difference is there are protective orders and there are peace orders. And protective orders versus peace orders has to do with the relationship that you have with the person. So a protective order has to do with it being that relationship with a person in the household. So whether it's an intimate partner, then you would get a protective order, or that immediate family member, then you go and get protective order. The peace order is for that neighbor who's harassing you across the street. So a protective order can last for a longer amount of time. It has a few more protections as a part of it, and a peace order is for generally a shorter amount of time and does not have quite as many protections. There's also an extreme risk protective order that can also take away someone's right to have firearms. And that's not a general protection as part of a protective order, although many other states restrict someone's right to have to go and takes away, they will actually go and take away firearms under an extreme risk protective order. Those are very difficult to get.
I bet they are. And there has to be a high bar of criteria that has to be met for that, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you kind of have to show that imminent risk of harm to either themselves or to others.
And there has to be knowledge that there are firearms available to the
Yes.
person? Okay. So evidence of that.
Right.
Yeah. And of
Yes.
course.
Just here, let's give you a microphone so other people can hear you.
Hi, I'm with the Women's Law Center. My name is Katie O'Malley. So for the protective orders, it doesn't have to necessarily be someone living in the household to get a protective order. So you could be a former spouse or just a former intimate partner or someone who shared a child with someone. So I just didn't want anyone listening to think I can't get a protective order unless I'm living in a household with the abuser. True.
Yeah, it can be that former household relationship, I guess would be the better way to phrase that.
Just one clarifying point that guns do get automatically taken away in a regular protective order as well.
Well, they don't have that right, but they won't go and take the firearms.
Yes, but they are prohibited
from possessing them.
Firearms for the duration of the protective order. Now, whether they abide by that is a different question.
Right. But under the extreme risks, they will actually go and take firearms out of the house.
Now, what about, and I'm sure this is like a totally different category, but as somebody who, again, I imagine like many victims don't really know the process. What about a restraining order? Is that a totally separate thing?
I think restraining order is kind of the colloquial
Okay.
phrase that we would
order?
use it.
Okay.
We would use it for.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be thrown in a criminal case that the judge is saying, I'm restraining you from going to someone's house.
Okay.
They could put that in a criminal case as a restriction, either in a bail order or as a probation order. But it's not, someone can say, I'm going to go get a restraining order, and they actually mean a protective order or a peace order.
Yeah. I've been watching too much true crime TV, so forgive me.
Well, in other states, a protective order can be called a restraining order. There's a lot of different titles for these things in different states, but they're essentially very similar things.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I think it's helpful because, again, like this is what we hear in pop culture. And I'm 52 years old, and I've joked about the true crime that I watch, but my mother was the person who was always warning her daughters, be safe, take the steps you need to be safe, and here's what could happen. And I have discovered that my age group of women we are obsessed, maybe it's just my friends, but we're like obsessed with watching these shows. And I think it's because there is so much crime against women. And do you have a statistic about that? And who are the majority, male versus female for the clients who come to MCVRC? I'm just curious about that.
Definitely for the people who come to us, the vast majority are women.
Mhm.
I think over 60% of our clients are women.
Mhm.
So yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. What else can we dig into, Joanna? Are there any other questions from the audience before we move on? Sure.
Hi, I just wanted to know if there were resources that help people with their credit and getting back into the workforce. Because, I mean, depending on the situation, this has impacted so much of my life. My job, my credit, my car. I've lost everything. And I just want to know if there are resources to help people get back into the workforce, or coach them about, why they have to leave their job or why they got fired or, why their credit is so bad. Like, I used to work in higher education and my credit is like an issue, trying to work in the finance office and the admissions office of a higher education institution. So are there resources that, I mean, I know housing is very important, but there are all of these other things that are, it's just so multifaceted that, like, are there resources for that part? I think the coaching for getting back into the workforce is my concern.
I do believe we have some of those resources, and it's not on the tip of my tongue. Does anyone else have any that are on the tip of your tongue? Yes, we've got some over here. All right, great.
So MNADV, which is the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, has a fund called SEED, and they administer this fund, and they have there's components for survivor-centered fundings where a survivor can select certain things that they need assistance with, but there's also a credit counseling component of that, and they offer free credit counseling and financial literacy classes as well. So there's different agencies that work with MNADV to help them administer their SEED money. And we are one of those, but they are the head of the SEED program in Maryland, as far as I know.
Can you say the organization?
Yes, it's MNADV, Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. SEED program, SED is what you're looking for.
Thank you. Is that a brochure for it? And we got another brochure. Okay, we got some brochures for that program. All right, that's great. Thank you. Oh, we
We have another question.
or another resource.
So I'm Barbara, and I'm with MCVRC. I will get your contact information. Springboard just updated their directory like as of 2 weeks ago statewide. There are, plus I have not had time to go through all of them, but it is broken down by category. Employment is one of them, education, all of that. I will get your information and I will reach out to you because there's a lot of information. And I'll be honest, I have not gone through it, but I know that there are a lot of some of the things that you're talking about because it was discussed at length with a lot of DV and sexual assault victims. So I will get that information to you. Absolutely.
Thank you, Barbara.
Absolutely.
Oh, and Jennifer, sorry, House of Ruth had one too. Oh, James had.
Hi, Joanna. My name is James Thomas. I'm with the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. I'm not sure, you may have said it and I may have missed it, but I want to make sure that listeners understand that in addition to the protective order, that also serves to function as a custody order. Oftentimes, the court will award custody in order to protect the petitioner from the respondent. The petitioner can also seek and get family support at that initial order. And oftentimes that can provide the individual who seeks the protective order an opportunity then to consult with one of these fine organizations that can give them advice and be part of a plan to exit a situation that's violent and dangerous for everyone. So there are additional resources there available. You may have said that. Thank you.
I don't think I said it quite as eloquently, so thank you, James.
Good evening, everyone. So as a legal advocate, of course, we deal with the clients directly, listening to their stories and everything. But one thing I know for me, or what can be the most frustrating part of the job, is how the domestic violence system is set, the judicial system is set. And oftentimes we find that our clients go through a loophole. In some instances, I've seen judges deny an order that should have been granted. And it's clear that the evidence is right there. So is there a way for advocates or anyone to get more involved in the legislation process where some of these laws can change? Because sometimes I feel that the system is not set up for the victims. So.
Well, I would agree with that. Yes, I think oftentimes it is. And unfortunately, I think oftentimes in the case you're just talking about, it's oftentimes that the judge isn't following the law that is there, I would say. And in those cases, I feel that oftentimes it's because they don't have a lawyer in there arguing with them. And so in those situations, I feel like it's really beneficial when they have either an attorney with the House of Ruth or with Women's Law Center or somebody else. There's some other organizations in other counties when they do have an attorney who knows what arguments to make and what the judge is going to listen to, and making sure they're hammering those points home, because oftentimes victims don't know what the important things are to argue. And it's important to point out, the physical violence and all of that, but they're just upset that the person, said these things against them. And yet, as offensive as they might have been, they weren't, a dangerous thing. And so, the judge is like, well, that, they were rude, okay, but it wasn't a dangerous situation. And so they're not going to take, see that as a danger to the person. And so oftentimes I think that's a concerning situation. But certainly when victims do feel that, there's a gap in the actual law, that's the time to change the law and to come forward and say, I think this is a problem because I had this situation, but the law didn't allow for it because it had A, B, and C, but not D. That would be the time. And so that would be a great opportunity to come to an organization like MCVRC or even House of Ruth or another organization and say, this is what we would like to see, and to try to let us help them advocate as well. But we do need the victims to be able to come forward and be willing to go to Annapolis and, testify in front of the legislature with us, because we need the victims to be able to say, hey, we need these changes, for the legislators to listen.
So Joanna, how would that happen if a victim comes forward and say they're with House of Ruth, and there is the loophole that you referred to? Do you collaborate with these? I'm going to point to this side of the room now with the Women's Law Center and our state attorney's office. Do you all come together and have a very serious coffee clutch over how we can address these gaps in the law for women or for said victim? I don't know that you necessarily have a protocol for that, but is there
No.
collaboration?
I think usually it's only a couple of us coming together, and yeah.
Right.
Because it gets to a point where, okay, if it's criminal, there's state attorney's office. But then some of them have had it's so severe that we can't even handle it. So how do you send them to a place that actually knows how to assist the client on that level, on a national level?
Well, yeah, so most of the state laws that impact our clients are state laws, we have found. We do represent people in federal court, I should say that. We do have several attorneys who are barred in federal court, and so we do represent clients in federal court in Maryland, occasionally in DC, but mostly Maryland federal court. And so we do have those cases as well. But generally we are Maryland focused. And so most of our situations are in Maryland. And so that is where we've had the most changes. It's most impactful if it's the same loophole that a few people have found. And so if we can have a few people who can talk about the same scenario, that's where we've had the most success. Versus just one case, but yeah. Yes.
So it seems like you brought up two different issues. One issue is a judge that's ignoring evidence and not granting an order. And then the other issue is what to do if the law in itself is not there to protect victims. So the first thing with a judge who is not necessarily complying with the law, there's the Judicial Disabilities Commission. So any complaints about the judiciary go through that process. And sometimes we've actually seen judges removed from the bench for actually not complying with the law, because you have to take an oath to comply with the law when you become a judge. And we saw that in a Baltimore County case several years ago, and this judge just terrorized a woman regarding her request for a protective order, and he was subsequently removed from the bench after that judicial process of disabilities complaint came through. So there is a way, to get redress against somebody in power that's not doing what they're supposed to do. And when it comes to advocating in the legislature, the Maryland's Women's Law Center and House of Ruth and MNADB, we do go down to the legislative session every year and advocate for laws to help with victims. We just passed not this past legislative session, but the one before, a redefinition of what consent means in sexual assault cases. And that was with collaboration with the organizations like Turnaround and the House of Ruth and MCASA. So there is a way for our organizations to go down and collectively speak for victims when it comes to sexual assault and intimate partner violence. And then a few years back, there was a little loophole in the protective order statutes so that if you were a victim of a sexual assault, but were not an intimate partner, say it's a random assault case where you were sexually assaulted, you could only get a peace order, which is a 6-month protective order, peace order. You couldn't get the protective order. So a lot of the organizations like the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence Partners, House of Ruth, the Women's Law Center went down there and had that changed. So there are ways to have advocacy groups change laws that aren't working for victims in the state of Maryland. And that's through a lot of the legal services that our organization and your organization and Turnaround and the state's attorney's office collaborate together on.
Any other questions? Because we're going to move on to another topic that you've probably seen billboards about. I do on my way into work every day, and that is human trafficking. So Joanna, if you wouldn't mind addressing human trafficking, what it is, how MCVRC can advocate for victims.
All right. Yeah. So human trafficking is a little different from domestic violence in that it is somebody being taken in or used outside of basically coerced into being used by somebody either for physical and or sexual work. and being forced into that. And it can be through a variety of ways. They can be taken, from outside of their home and moved to a totally different place, but it can also be within the home, and it can happen to children, and it can happen to adults as well. And so it's basically the use of humans as a commodity kind of idea.
Do you see an increase in human trafficking victims approaching MCVRC?
Well, I would say like 10 years ago there were none, and
Yeah.
now we certainly have a handful.
Okay.
Yes,
And
every
so
year.
these must be victims who've managed to get away, because my understanding is usually if you're trafficked, that you are being held against your will.
Yes, it's very difficult for people to get away, and so it's I think probably much more difficult for people to get out of those scenarios than in domestic violence situations.
And when
that
you
we've seen.
involve the police department in whatever jurisdiction it is, that must be a larger enterprise again, rather than, a violent crime, a shooting or something, because again, in a similar way of domestic violence, this is kind of a cycle of behavior, right? So do the police have to set up a sting to find those who are perpetrating against?
Well, it can come in a number of ways. Oftentimes they are found through stings, but it can also kind of happen by accident, where they are found through, traffic stops and other kind of accidental stops where they are located and then able to tell the police what is going on, and then so it kind of happens by accident. But then they are able to reach out and get help at that time. So it seems to be both situations.
Okay.
But yes.
Thank you for that. Any questions about human trafficking? Okay. I'm going to again shift gears here and talk about something that we've also all encountered, and that is fraud and identity theft, which is not something that would occur to me could be part of MCVRC.
Well, it's a very common crime.
It is.
And something I think that we see a lot more of. People are more aware of it happening, whether it's to friends, even to yourself. You see more of whether it's email phishing, and so you see those kinds of emails coming through, people trying to, whether it's email or credit card charges, fraud charges. I think everybody has some experience with those trying to come through your credit cards. And so it does tend to happen, and everyone becomes concerned when you're dealing with, whether it's your elderly parents or other people that you're trying to keep safe. So there's a lot of
So
what
can MCVRC do for somebody who's a victim of identity theft or fraud?
So there's a lot of different things depending on the situation. The best way to deal with identity theft and fraud is to prevent it, because often trying to clean up the mess is very difficult and very complex. And so, trying to, if you have an elderly person or parent or child, freezing somebody's credit is always the best way to try to prevent it. Teaching someone to always question emails, not clicking on links, that type of thing is the best way to, have a good relationship with a parent, with a child, so they'll come and ask you before they're going to be like, oh no, I think my grandchild's in trouble and he's calling from jail, needs me to bond him out. Be like, no, you're going to call your parents first and ask them, instead of just paying the $1,000 and sending it in gift cards. So those types of things are the best way. But MCVRC can help as far as making sure that it's reported. Not identity theft is difficult because it can often be hard to track.
Mm-hmm.
However,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they are tracked, and it depends on the situation and what can be done, because we have had situations where it is tracked and they are able to find the people because
Wow.
they don't all live overseas, and it's not all done far away. Oftentimes it is people who are known to the victims. And so oftentimes it is relatives, it is close friends, and it is people who know stuff about you. So
Yeah, and I have to say that when I was asked to do this, I did not think I'd be sitting here thinking about my own self, but my son was a victim of fraud and potentially identity theft.
mhm.
And my son is 23 years old, and he can, use media way better than I can. I go to him, and he would always say, "Mom, don't click on the link in the text message that you get." But just as a really brief cautionary tale, because it just wouldn't occur to me to call MCVRC. My son got a call that it said it was Apple. My kids are all Mac users, and the rest of the story. But what happened is I was taking a nap, and the next thing I knew, my son ran upstairs to wake me up, and he said, "Mom, I thought I was on the phone with Apple, but now I don't know who I'm on the phone with." And I said, "Turn off your phone immediately." But guess what? He gave them access, which we learned, forget about it, because he gave them access, but he thought he was fixing a bug on his phone, and they truly convinced him. He looked at the phone number, it was so convincing to him. Now he says, when I tell the story, I feel like the biggest idiot in the world, but because he gave them access to his phone, they scanned his face, they saw his driver's license, they got his social security number, which he should have known better about that one, because I've talked to him about that. But, he had $1,000 in his account that is now gone, and he has PayPal, Cash App, all that stuff, because all these kids in their 20s have this.
Mhm.
Well, Venmo, he didn't have money for Venmo, but Venmo sent the thieves $1,000. They don't care that it was fraud. He owes Venmo $1,000. And my husband, who left so he doesn't get to be embarrassed here, he went for a bathroom break. My husband Venmo'd him $50, and guess what? It didn't go to my son because it now all goes to Venmo. But thankfully, because of, I run a chamber of commerce, so I knew about 50 bankers to call, including my own bank, and they told us exactly what to do. Thankfully his credit is shut down, so we did the right things, and we did them very quickly. But I'm just so glad to know, because that would not occur to me. Now, I don't think our case is one that, could be tracked. Nobody told us to report it. I think we're just out of luck, really. But it is very real, and it is very scary. And my father, who's in his 80s, after this happened, he got an iPhone, and he has trouble with it. But we role played with him and said, somebody could call you sounding like one of your grandchildren. And we role played because you think of it intellectually, but when it happens, and that's what happened to my son, we know with fraud that it's that you need to do this now, or your phone is going to blow up, right? You're going to lose everything. And they push and push. And so I'm just throwing this out there as a cautionary tale. And if we can get this amped up about fraud and identity, think of the victims that you all are dealing with every day with very, very serious crimes. But it's great to know that there can be some hope in these cases.
Right. And it certainly, it doesn't happen in every case at all, but it does happen in some. So it is important to report them. It is important to get them tracked, and because you don't know which cases are the ones that are happening close to home and which ones are being, caused by people overseas that are not going to be caught. And you just don't know that.
Right.
So it is
Right.
important to report
Well,
it.
it's great. I mean, the resources here at the Resource Center are just so broad.
So one thing I'd like to say that's really easy to do, I think.
Well, but to get it on streaming, we need the microphone.
So about 2 years ago, so the Cash App, I had a hack and it was like $2,500. But one thing's easy for everybody to do. After each use of whatever app you use, detach your card. That was one of the things that I did learn. Someone told me, and I ended up finally getting an executive. They had to take all this, go. I went through Wells Fargo and all that. But one of the things, if you're going to use the app with the cards, after each use, detach your card. And then people think it's a problem. They are aggravated. They don't want to go back into it. But they say in like 80% of the time, at least 85% of the time, if they can't get to the card, they'll move on. But if you're going to use them, detach your card after each use.
Yeah, no, that's great advice.
Thank you. All right, Joanna, is there anything else that you'd like to add about MCVRC? How can people get involved? How can they learn more? How can they stay connected?
All right. Yes. I think for those who want to be involved with MCVRC, there's a few, simple steps to do. You can go to our website to sign up. If you want to be involved in our newsletter, you can follow us on social media. We are on all the major social medias, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few of them, but those are major ones. X, yes, formerly known as Twitter. So yes, we are on all of those. You can attend our outreach events. We post those on all our social media websites. We also, if you want to donate, that's also on our website as well. And then we do go to Annapolis. We do fight legislation as well as advocate for legislation. We like to say that a lot of our good work is fighting against bad legislation, as well as advocating for good legislation. And a lot of that is in our work for homicide victims and fighting on their behalf, because there really aren't a lot of groups that work specifically with homicide victims. So there's a lot of great groups out there. A lot of it is focused on domestic violence, sexual assaults, and those types of cases, which are important and very, we're happy that there are so many great groups out there, but we do a lot of work for homicide victims. And so that's where a lot of our legislative work focuses on. So that's where you will often find us for the little bit of work that we do in Annapolis. That's where most of our focus is. So that's pretty much.
And HB 853, is that something we should know about?
Yes. So House Bill 853 was passed last legislative session. It was one of the House bills that we fought against, and it expanded what was the juvenile legislation that allowed for juveniles, which were 17, 18 years old, who had been sentenced as adults. So if they were sentenced as adults in homicides, and if they had served 20 years, of course, when they say served 20 years, they don't mean actually 20 years, but credited with 20 years, that they could be resentenced so go back to court and be resentenced. So this is on top of parole hearings that they would be entitled to. And so now we have quite a lot so House Bill 853 now expands that to any individuals who were sentenced while under the age of 25. So that bill will go into effect October 1st. So we expect there to be a lot more hearings. So we've been very busy representing victims in those cases, and we expect quite a few more to start happening pretty quickly here after October 1st. So we'll be busy with those cases.
Well, I just want to thank you for everything and all of your amazing information today, and for bringing all these partners together. I'm a nonprofit girl. I always say that. I run a chamber of commerce, and it's these partners right here, most of which are nonprofits, that make our community safer, that make our communities stronger, and budgets are tight. So I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I would hope that you would be supporting the cause here, certainly with MCVRC and any of these other nonprofits that are really here to make life better for everybody. So Joanna, thank you so very much for everything that you lead. And how many people now work for MCVRC?
We have 39.
39.
Yeah.
And you started off just with Mrs. Roper. And
yeah, it was strictly volunteers
Yeah.
in the beginning. So
just remarkable growth.
yeah.
So congratulations and thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you, Beth.
Sure.
And thank you to all the great organizations here tonight. We really appreciate you guys being here. So thank you.